So we're back. We've got another episode of the Driving Loaded podcast today, and Jordan introduced me to a guy that I'll let him explain the story how they met, but he sent a video to me about this guy. He was at a church, and he was basically giving a testimony, a sermon, talking to this church, and immediately I could tell that this dude was different. He'd grown up somewhere that I have frequented a couple of times, and so very intrigued. And his name is Levi Ferguson. He's originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and statistically he should be dead or in prison, but instead he's a youth mentor and a transformational speaker who has a passion to help people discover their true potential and power in order to start changing the world in the unique way, only the way he can. So welcome, Levi. Really glad that you're here. Great video. Amazing story, to say the least.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the invite. So I'm excited for what we're going to do here today.
So Perfect. I'll give the secondary, like where the connection came from, because Levi and I have known each other for a couple months now. And where our connection came from was we were both part of the fourth quarter challenge for one of the Eric Thomas and Associates challenges. They have kind of ongoing throughout the year. One of those ways that you can kind of sharpen yourself and sharpen others and part of a community. And anyhow, so I signed up for this to better myself, better my personal skills and my professional skills and family type stuff as well. But anyway, so part of that program is having accountability partners. And in a pretty broad sense, there's a lot of different areas you target through these challenges. And Levi and I connected, and it was just like day one hearing his story and his background. And you can feel the passion of life in general coming through the phone. And I just wanted more of that, around me. And, we just kicked it off right away and had a good connection. So we've stayed in contact since then and typically talk at least once a week and kind of just go through life. And, we're like a lot of places you hear, iron sharpens iron, right? So Yep. That's kind of the connection. And the more we've done these podcasts, I realized that Levi's got a story that has to be told. More people have to hear his story. And the reason I see the need for that or whatnot is I hear his story and I'm like, I am such a punk to complain and gripe about anything. I literally no baseline for complaining when I hear a guy's story like Levi's. So anyhow, that's kind of where I think we need to put him and guys like him on a pedestal to get more people excited about life, because what we have going on is so, minuscule to so many people's stories. So that's kind of where, our story's connected, and, it's just the start of a long relationship. So I'm excited.
Yeah. It's been great connecting with Jordan. He's a cool guy. I appreciate his input and investment in me through our phone calls and text messages. He's encouraging, and he's, like he said, iron sharpens iron. He's somebody who, through how he interacts with me, builds me up. And so I appreciate his friendship and the interaction that we have.
Right on. So before we go into your interview, I got to kind of pull back and ask Pete about some fishing trips that he just been on. He's been posting pictures. He's been bragging about all these fish he's slaying. I never once got a text message saying like, hey, there's an open seat over here, bro. Like, all you got to do is pay for airfare or something, anyways, you just went fishing last week, right?
Yeah. So it is in Dahlonega, Georgia. I'm down here in Cole, GA, or Columbus, Georgia, as they call it. So, and Levi would probably has heard that before, Cole, GA. No. So I found out through another veteran buddy of mine that is part of the Project Healing Waters group that we are a part of. Somehow he found this place. It's a nonprofit for veterans, and it's called veteransflyfishing.org. And it's a family that owns real estate. It's their house, their property, and they own about a half a mile of the river that the property is butted up to. And so they wanted to share that property with veterans. And so the first and third of every month, 8 veterans get to come out there with an individual guide to go fly fishing in their section of the river. And not only, do they let us use it, but they also stock it with trophy trout. So went out there Monday with another buddy of mine who actually is a guide in Wyoming. He'll be on the podcast in the future. But anyway, so we went fly fishing out there, and I posted a picture of the the rainbow trout was 22 inches, which is a monster. Especially, if you know anything about trout fishing in cold waters or North Georgia or even further north, they're not that big generally. So it was amazing, and I thankfully had no cell service there, so that made life even better out there. But yeah, it was basically 2 days of I stayed there another day with my guide, and then we went fishing. We dissected the river a little bit more, and I learned a tremendous amount of basically learn about the ecosystem of the trout there. So when you break it down, there's so many different things, but it was amazing. I mean, I'm sitting there in 40-degree water and waders, and I just hear the waterfall behind me, and dude, it's amazing. Like it's almost indescribable. So
Beautiful.
yeah. Yeah.
You put me on the scene of the movie that's probably the top three. What is the top three, in my opinion? The movie called River Runs Through It.
That's a good one.
I
Yep.
literally was like in a scene of that show for a quick minute there. I saw that picture and I was stoked for you. I was jealous once again, but I was stoked for a guy to get out and clear his head and catch a big fish like that.
Yeah, and just for anybody listening, or you, Jordan, as well, it is free to veterans. So all you got to do is contact the director, and then he'll put you in there, and boom. So
And what's that program called again? So anybody that may not know.
it's veteransflyfishing.org. It's in Frog Hollow, northeast of Dahlonega, right outside of Dahlonega. So, and I know Levi is familiar with that area as well. So, without further ado, I guess we'll go in his interview, since this isn't about us. This is actually about him. Nobody wants to hear about my boring life. So
I do. Somebody cares, man. Your mom cares. I care.
yeah, that's what
People like fishing, though.
People do like
dude.
fishing.
Dude, as they say out there in Dahlonega, the tug is the drug. So it's take it as you will. But
something else, I guess. But
yes, that's $20. But so
that just happened.
yeah.
Oh man. But so Levi, I'm gonna have Pete steer these conversations a little more than I, because I've heard more of them. So I think him steering and asking more of the real questions. But obviously I've watched a lot of your videos you produce. So you're very positive in nature. Like everything you do is to lift people up. I've talked to you, and I know you've had a down day, and I watched a video you post later that day, and it's like, this guy's on fire for so many things. He's alive and he's well, but he's real. And so I love that your ability to understand that you can go through tough times and still project life into the world, right? And that's something I truly appreciate about you, and kind of laying the foundation of this conversation. Like Pete's intro for you, you should be dead and or in prison right now, and you're not. You're not either, right? And you're not just. In fact, I told Pete last night, and we were kind of talking about today a little bit, and I'm like, so many times in life you see people playing the victim card, and you're like, dude, quit griping, get off the couch, go to work, like put down the homeless, I can't get a job sign, and go get a job. You got 2 legs, 2 arms, and a good head, right? And you look at stories like yours, and I told Pete, I'm like, out of anybody I've ever met, a guy like you, if you played that card, that victim card, just lived off the system, I honestly would give you a pass. I would be like, for what you've gone through, dude, I'm not going to judge a guy, but the fact of the matter is you haven't, and you're taking guys like myself and motivating and getting me to stay like, dude, I've got so much more to, the start of my life was so much better, and I was so much further advanced, if you will, in that regard. So it's definitely excelling me in my thought process. But Pete, do you want to kind of start out with his earlier years, and we'll go from there?
Yeah. So, like I said in the intro, I've in the military. I spent some time training, doing urban exercises in Atlanta, and I had to do air familiarization throughout all of Atlanta. But my section was the south side of Atlanta. So you can guess, what my reaction was. I'm like, okay, I'm one of the only persons here that is not. Black, or, not trying to be racist or anything, but, it's like, it's the ghetto. Like,
Yeah.
it is the ghetto. And that is where you were raised. You were born and raised in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go through that a little bit. Just, kind of like you did at the Hope Church, give us a little background. Hey, you're born in Atlanta, and obviously from the get go, dude, you were handed a crap sandwich.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you can tell even just by the way I talk. I'm from the South,
Yep.
but yeah, I'm from Atlanta, I'm from Gwinnett County specifically. There's rougher areas in Atlanta than where I'm from, uh, but it was just my upbringing that really caused a lot of issues for me. Just coming into the world. Right away, there were three possibilities as to who my father was. All three of them struggled with drug addiction. Two of them went to prison. One of them is dead. I met two of them at some point in my life, and one of them I never met, and that's the one that's dead. Uh, my mother also struggled with drug addiction. Whenever I was born, she was around uh, for about 3 months. And then I was fortunate that my grandparents were there to take me in, but my mother, she kind of just went back out on the streets. She was struggling with a cocaine addiction. Um, and I was just lucky, to be honest. Like I was just lucky or blessed or favored or whatever you want to call it, that my grandparents were there to take me in and let me live with them, because I don't know what would have happened if that wouldn't have been my story. I could have ended up in foster care. I could have ended up dead as a child. So I was lucky that they were there to take me in and give me a place to live. But my mom was kind of in and out of my life as a child. I remember one morning when I was 7 years old, it was a Saturday morning. I woke up and I could have swore that I heard my mother's voice. Um, I jumped out of bed. I ran into the living room where my grandmother was at, and I said, "Where's mom?" And she said, "Well, she's not here." And I said, "Yes, she is. I heard her voice." And she said, "No, your mother just called. She was on the phone and she's in jail." Um, and for me, that was kind of a recurring theme in my childhood. My mom would be in my life. She would be out of my life. She would be around, but then she would be gone. She would be in jail. I remember many times going to visit her and sitting on the other side of a glass, looking at her in a jail uniform, green or orange, in Gwinnett County Jail. Um, and so that was just a recurring theme throughout my childhood. And, I don't know uh, if you guys have ever really thought about this, but we all learn pain as infants. We all learn pain when we're babies. And so, for me, it's kind of like this hardcore game of peekaboo with my mom as an infant all the way throughout my childhood. It's like you play the game of peekaboo with a child or a baby, and you're like, peekaboo, but for me, my mom would actually disappear. Uh, so the hands would be removed and she was actually gone, and she didn't show up for months at a time. Um, and so what does that do to a baby? I didn't understand this when I was coming up. I didn't understand this as a teenager. It's only in the last few years that I understand this, but a lot of the things that I did in life were related to the pain that I learned as an infant. I learned how to respond to that pain, and we all do. We all learn how to respond to pain in a certain kind of way. And what we try to do is escape that pain. And so that's exactly what I did. Now, as a kid, you can escape pain by playing with your friends. You can escape pain by playing basketball or some kind of sport. You can escape pain by getting involved into video games or whatever type of hobby you can pick up. But eventually, that doesn't work. Eventually, you turn to other ways. And so whenever I was 11, I actually followed in my mother's and my father's footsteps, whoever he is. When I was 11, I started smoking weed, drinking alcohol, having sex. And from that point forward, it just progressed. When I was 12 years old, my mom had gotten married. And I went to go visit my mother at her home. And I was 12 years old. I sat down on the couch with my mom. She pulled a tin out from under the table. She opened that tin up, and right in front of me, she rolled a joint, licked it, twisted it up, and took me out on the front porch and smoked that joint with me when I was 12 years old. And from that day forward, I actually began to receive marijuana, not money, but marijuana as an allowance from my mother and my stepfather every single week. And so you can imagine that marijuana became a very heavy part of my life. I was already smoking weed on a daily basis, but then I began receiving marijuana as an allowance. So it's like that was a huge part of my life, along with alcohol and sex.
So Levi, when that is happening, you're 11, 12 years old, your positive influencers are supposed to be positive, are giving you marijuana for allowance. Did you have any, I know your grandparents were around, but at that point when your mom was heavily involved, or if you want to call it that, did you have any positive influence? Anybody kind of telling you what a good moral compass should look like?
So, I mean, my grandparents were in a lot of ways a positive influence in my life. Um, I remember going to church until I was 5 or 6, but for whatever reason, when I was 5 or 6, we stopped going. My grandfather, he used to be a pastor, so they did try to teach me the right things. But at the same time, the environment that I lived in was an environment of enablement. I could pretty much do whatever I wanted and get away with it. There were no real consequences for my behavior. And so when there's no consequences for bad behavior, you tend to kind of lean into that bad behavior, jump into it and embrace it and continue it, because at the time you don't understand the destruction that it's causing and you enjoy it. And so that's exactly what I did. And I didn't understand at that time that what I was doing through my use of drugs and alcohol was escaping the pain that I learned beginning as a baby. But that's exactly what I was doing. I was trying to escape that pain, and I was doing it with risky behavior. I was doing it by getting high. I mean, nobody gets as high as I was getting unless they're trying to escape pain. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah. So from that point forward, 12 years old, began receiving marijuana as an allowance, but I just got more heavily involved in that type of behavior. And so I went from marijuana. I dropped out of school in 8th grade. I started using cocaine when I was 13. I started using meth when I was 14. My stepfather was actually arrested for trafficking methamphetamine when I think I was probably 13. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. And when he was in prison, I remember his uncle was over at my mother's house. It was in the middle of the night, and I was 13 or 14. He was teaching me how to cook methamphetamine in our kitchen. And my baby brother was just, in the other room. And so he's literally twirling this pot of meth around in front over an open fire in front of me when my baby brother's in the other room. And I actually, from that point forward, also got heavily involved in methamphetamine. I began selling it as well. And so that became a pretty influential drug in my life. You could call it my drug of choice for at least a couple years. And so, meth is no joke. Meth destroys lives. It destroys your teeth. And people really get hooked on that. I remember hearing people call it the devil's drug when I was coming up, just because of the power that it had over you once you got involved with it. I stayed up, I remember one time for 13 days in a row. I think I was probably 15, no sleep for 13 days. That's how much I liked getting high. That was me escaping the pain. 13 days in a row, I was hallucinating. I remember looking up in the trees outside at night, seeing men coming down out of the trees on ropes with guns. They weren't real, but that's what I saw, I was hallucinating because I'd been up so long. I saw men on the building across the street in front of me with guns.
So real quick on that, I want to interject as a cop, right? When I was a cop, I'd see a kid like you, and I would look at the outward appearance of you, the fact that you're using drugs, that you're selling drugs at a young age, and I'd have judged you from the external. I would never have stopped for a second to say why. Why is he doing what he's doing? I would have probably put you in, well, I guess juvie at that point, right? Got you into a system. Wouldn't have fixed anything. So I'm assuming you had some interactions, right, about that age did you have any interactions with police, or did you just skate by and you were fine?
I did have interactions with the police. It's funny, most of my interactions, I didn't get caught for what I was doing. I've been searched. I can't even tell you how many times I've been searched by law enforcement and they didn't find the drugs that I had on me. Just several times. And now I look back at that and I understand that there was a reason why they didn't find what they found on me. And that's because there was a higher power working on my behalf. Because today, I work with youth, and if I had gotten caught for a lot of those different things and they would found the drugs on me, I would have had felony charges on my record. And there's no way that I can do some of the things that I'm trying to do right now in life. But I was arrested several times, with that being said. When I was 16, I'd gotten to the point where I loved getting high so much that I was popping pills and drinking alcohol with it. And so there was one particular night that some of my friends and I, we had been drinking beer and taking Valiums, and I'd taken somewhere between 8 and 12 Valium 10s. And I don't know if you know anything about Valium, but, or if you know anything about popping pills and drinking alcohol together, but essentially when you do that, it intensifies the effect of each substance. And so when you take the pills, you get high, and when you drink alcohol, you get drunk. But when you do it together, man, you're just out there. Like, you're just out of your mind. And so I was so high that night. And we decided to go rob somebody in the hood. And we told the guy driving the car, we said, look, man, we're gonna pull up in the hood down here. And there's going to be somebody standing on the corner. And what you're going to do is when they come up to the car, they're going to ask you what you want. You tell them you want $20 worth of crack. He said, all right. So we get there, and sure enough, there's a guy standing out on the corner. He comes up to the car window, and he says, what you need? And the guy driving, I don't know if he was too high or too drunk to remember what we told him, but he said, man, I don't want any of that. He messed up our whole plan. So we went home. We headed back home. I was sitting in the back seat, drunk and high off of pills, out of my mind. I'm 16 years old. I got a loaded 25 caliber handgun in my hand. I got a beer bottle between my legs, and I fell asleep. Well, as I fall asleep, that beer bottle, it spills over, and it wakes me up. And I lean over to pick up that beer bottle, and when I do, bam, the gun goes off, and it shoots me in the leg. I'm so high that I didn't even really feel it. So, a couple seconds later, I'm like, I think I shot myself. And my friends, they're like, well, we gotta take you to the hospital. And I'm like, no, let's just smoke a blunt. Let's just smoke some weed and go home and go to sleep. That's how high I was. Needless to say, they did take me to the hospital. I remember I got out of the car. The guy that was driving drove off and left us. The guy that was in the front passenger seat helped me walk into the hospital. And I get in there, and I told them that somebody robbed me. They believed me. But the guy that was driving the car a couple nights later, he actually got pulled over. Or actually a couple days later, he got pulled over because the night before he was out stealing stuff in his car, and he had a bandana over his license plate. So it concealed the license plate number, but he forgot to take it off the next day. So the cops got behind him. They see this bandana, they pull him over, and they ask him what all the blood in the back seat's from. And he told them what happened. And he had the guns in the car that we had that night. So a few days later, they came to my house and they arrested me. They charged me with underage possession of a firearm. I was 16 years old. So they took me to a youth detention center. I sat in that youth detention center only for a couple of weeks. I thought that they were going to give me 90 days boot camps and ship me off to boot camp. But instead, they actually put me on probation, and they said, look, you're going to be on probation for as long as your probation officer feels necessary. And they made me go back to school because I think I said earlier I'd already dropped out of school when I was in 8th grade. But they made me go back to school. So that was my first real encounter with law enforcement. That was the first time I was arrested. I'd had some interaction with law enforcement before, but it never materialized into anything. That was the first time that I was arrested. And when I got out, like I said, they made me go back to school, and my probation officer, she thought I was good. Because, the one thing that I did change in my life after getting arrested for possession of a firearm was that I only smoked weed once a month. And that was so that I could pass a drug test every 30 days. But other than that, I was still doing meth. I was still doing coke. I was still drinking. I was still popping pills. I was still doing all of that. I was still selling drugs. But every month I could go in and I could pass a drug test, and my probation officer thought I was good. So within 6 months, she let me off probation. Fortunately for me, when I was in school, I met this girl, and she shared a message with me that ended up changing my life. It didn't immediately, but she told me that Jesus died for my sins. She told me he rose from the dead. And she said to me, if he has that kind of power, he can change your life. Now, I heard that message before. I'm from the South. So, you hear that message all the time. So I heard that message before, but I've never done anything with that message personally before. I believed it was true, but I just never had done anything with it. And so I continued living the way that I was living. I rejected that message. I didn't care what she was talking about. Got heavier involved with the meth and the drugs. And when I was 17, I ended up getting arrested 2 more times. Now, I know that every state is different, but in Georgia, when you're 17 and you get arrested, you don't go to youth detention center anymore. You go to big boy jail. So the first time that I got arrested when I was 17, I had gone to a gas station. And like I said before, I had been doing a lot of meth during this time period. I saw this guy at the gas station that had been talking about me. Now, methamphetamine makes you aggressive. So I heard he'd been talking about me. I saw him at the gas station. I'm walking into the store and he's coming out of the store. And I said, "What's up? I heard you." I called him a couple names, that I'm not gonna say them here, but I called him a couple names. And I said, "I heard you've been talking about me." He just said, "What's up?" like he was saying hi, like, "What's up?"
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then he went and got in his truck. I went into the store. I bought whatever it was that I went in to get. I was coming out of the store and he flicked me off through his windshield. And so I was already mad at the guy, but he flicks me off. So that pissed me off, So I walk around to his driver's side window and I'm yelling at the guy, screaming at him. I'm like, "Look, if you got something to say, get out and say it to my face." And he wouldn't get out. So what he did was he backed up out of his parking spot and I stood in front of his truck and he revved his engine up like he was going to run me over. And I just stood there. And eventually I go back around to his driver's side and I'm screaming at him again. I repeat what I said before. I said, "Look, you got something to say, get out and say it to my face." So he doesn't get out. But what he does do is he rolls his window down about this far. And he had taken a bite out of this piece of beef jerky. And he threw that piece of beef jerky and it hit me in my face. And I'm already mad, I'm already pissed off. So he hits me in the face with a piece of beef jerky, and not just a piece of beef jerky, but one he already took a bite out of, So what I tried to do is I tried to punch him in the face, but the window wasn't down far enough for me to punch him. And so what I ended up doing was I grabbed his window and I shook it and I kicked the side of his truck, the driver's side door, 3 or 4 times, just as hard as I could. And I put this big dent in the side of his truck. He drives off. He calls me the name of a feminine body part. And at the same time goes to the police station and files a police report against me. So 3 weeks later, the police came to my house. They arrested me. They charged me with criminal destruction of property in the 2nd degree. That's a felony in Georgia. So they take me to jail. I'm sitting in a holding cell, and I got bonded out, I think 32 hours later. So I got out. And at this time, I was dating this girl who was a Christian, and I wanted to marry her. And so I was asking myself the question, like, if you're going to marry this girl, how are you going to bring her and a family into a lifestyle like this? And so what I tried to do from that point, I tried to change my life. I tried to stop doing the drugs that I was doing. I tried to stop smoking weed. I just couldn't stop. I just like to get high too much. Like, again, it goes back to that whole idea of trying to escape the pain that you're in. I didn't even know I was in pain at the time, but I had learned to escape that pain through getting high. And so it was very difficult for me to stop doing that when that was my escape method, my coping mechanism. And so I just couldn't do it. And again, when I was 17, later on that year, I got arrested one more time. And this time what happened was a friend of mine and we were going to pick up some methamphetamine. I was selling meth at that time pretty heavily. And at the time, I dropped out of school, so I actually only had a learner's license. I was 17, but you can't get your full license if you drop out of school. Then you can have your learners until you're 18. So this guy that was with me, we went to go pick up some drugs. I'm 17. He's like 22, 23 years old at the time. And we're riding in a 1984 box top Chevy Caprice Classic that I bought when I was 17 years old. Nice car, looked brand new. I bought it with drug money at 16. So we're on our way back from picking up this meth, and a cop passes me. He's going the opposite direction as I am. I'm coming this way. He's going that way. Soon as he sees that 1984 box top Chevy Caprice Classic, he knows it's me. He knows who I am. He knows that I don't have a regular license. So as soon as he sees that vehicle, he turns his blue lights on. He's going the opposite direction, but as soon as he sees that car, he turns the lights on. So he does a U-turn. The guy that's with me, he's like, "Look, man, you gotta stop and let me out because I got a warrant for my arrest." So I'm like, all right. So I turned into this neighborhood on the right, and I thought I stopped the car, but I guess I didn't, because whenever he opened the door, he just rolled out of the car. And what I remember is I look up in my rearview mirror as I'm pulling off, and I see him get up off the ground. He takes off running. The cop's pointing the gun at him. He takes off running. I pull further into the neighborhood. I stop in this cul-de-sac. I park the car. I jump out of the car. I run through the woods. I drop the drugs that are on me. I toss them. I got away. He got away. But the car was in my grandfather's name. So, even then, like if I'd gotten caught then, that would have been an automatic felony that I couldn't have fought in court, because they would have caught me with possession. I would have had the drugs on me. But I got away, and they never found the drugs. But the next day I turned myself in because the car was in my grandfather's name. So the police came to my house the next morning. And I remember when they got there, I said, you know what, I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to go in my room and just eat a little Pop-Tart before we go sit in this holding cell, because they're not going to offer me nothing but a peanut butter, honey, and vanilla wafer sandwich. So I went in my room, ate a Pop-Tart. I came out. I surrendered myself to them. They charged me with fleeing and eluding. In Georgia, that's a misdemeanor. I don't know if it's a felony elsewhere, but that was a misdemeanor. They took me to jail. And I remember sitting in that holding cell in Gwinnett County Jail for the third time. Well, second time that year, but the third time I had been arrested that year, within about a year period. So I sat in that holding cell, and that's when I really began to think about that message that I've been hearing all my life. Jesus died for you. He died to pay for your sins. He rose from the dead. He's powerful, and he can change your life. I'd heard it before. I didn't care about it, but I'd heard it. I agreed that it was true. But right there in that holding cell, I began to think about that message, and I laid down on a cold metal bench, and I prayed, and I said, God, you know what? I don't want to live my life like this anymore. You know that. I tried to change. I know I can't change. You know I can't change. I tried to stop it. It didn't work. No matter what I tried, it didn't work. I said, just take my life and do what you want with it. Make me who you want me to be. And so right there, even though I was sitting in a holding cell behind jail bars, I was more free than I'd ever been really in my life. And I got bonded out. I think I was in there, 30 something hours again, but I got bonded out. And within 3 months, my entire life had changed. There were a couple struggles that I went through. I messed up. I did some drugs a couple times during that 3-month period. But at the end of that 3 months, I'd completely walked away from that lifestyle. I stopped using drugs. I stopped selling drugs. I walked away from the gang community that I was involved with. And everything had changed for me. And I knew immediately that I had to do something with my life. I had to take my life, use my story, use what I had, and do something with it and make a positive impact. I knew I had to do that. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I knew that I had to do something with my life. I remember I was laying in bed one night watching TV, and one of those commercials came on. It was like Feed the Children or something like that. It was showed a video of children over in Africa just hungry, not having any food. And it was like a commercial to raise money for getting them food. And for some reason, that commercial just spoke to me. I was like, man, I need to take my life, and I need to help people who are in need. I need to help people who are hurting. And so that's what I began to do almost immediately. I got involved into an inner city bus ministry church ministry almost immediately. I think I was 18 when this happened. So I got involved in that ministry, and it's a ministry that works with kids from the inner city. It buses them into this church where they ordinarily wouldn't have a chance to interact with church or anything like that. And so I started working with the kids in there. I started mentoring them, spending time with them. I got my GED when I was 17. That's your good enough diploma, if you didn't know. So I went ahead and got that because I'd already dropped out of school in 8th grade, and then again when I was 16. But I got my GED, and I started Bible college when I was 18. I actually made it to college before my graduating class. So I knew that there was a calling on my life. I knew that there was purpose with my life. If I'm still here, then there's got to be some reason that I'm alive. There's got to be some reason that I went through what I went through, and I got to reach back and help people who are in that position. So I started working with youth almost immediately. I went to Bible college. I ended up going to seminary in Dallas, Texas, at Dallas Theological Seminary, and I became a youth pastor. And I served as a youth pastor down in Texas for several years. I moved back to Atlanta for about a year, and then I came out to Sacramento, California, and took a position as a youth pastor at a Chinese church. And I served in that position for a couple years, and then doors started opening, and I felt like I was being led in a different direction in my life. So I took a position with the company that I'm with now. It's an anti-tobacco company. And what we do is we work to reduce tobacco sales to minors in California. So my job is to go and give presentations in high schools, colleges, youth organizations about our program, and to help students who are interested in our program enroll into the program. And then when they enroll into the program, we actually pay them to go into gas stations and try to buy tobacco products, cigarettes, vape products. And whenever the store sells to them, the store ends up receiving a fine. And so that's how we reduce tobacco sales to minors. That's my job right now. But what I'm really passionate about is speaking. That's my passion. That's my gifting. And so what I'm working on right now on the side is starting a speaking career that I hope that'll eventually go full time. And so what I want to do is I want to share my story with people, because I know that, it's a crazy story and people are going through things in life, and this story can help them. And so what I'm working on doing is getting into high schools, youth organizations, recovery organizations, recovery ministries, youth detention centers, prisons. And I want to get into those different places and share my story and inspire people to change their lives. So essentially what I've done is all the stuff that I've been through, all the pain that I've been through, I've taken that and I've tried to turn it into a passion to help other people who are hurting, who are in situations like I was in, who have gone through things like I've gone through, and who are just in pain in general. Because I believe that what I've been through, the story that I have, can inspire people to hang on through what they're going through and to turn around and use it to help other people in the end. So that's where I'm at today.
So you think about your story, look at other greats that are out there in this speaking community, like the Eric Thomases, the Tony Robbins. Like, one had cancer, one was a dropout in high school. Like, your story is very relatable to these people that are now predominant figures in that area. And, you think of some people that might see your path and be like, well, I didn't deal with drugs. I didn't deal with the mom like that. I lost a sibling. I lost a parent. I had an abusive husband. All these things have one common denominator, right? They have pain. Doesn't matter from what age they had pain. And I think your story can relate and transcend any walk of life, because you've dealt with so many different levels of pain. And I think the one thing that you kind of pointed back to is if you want to call it a salvation story, whatever, like, this isn't about pushing religion on anybody. This is about real life, someone dealing with real pain, real suffering. And regardless of what you've been through, where you're at now, where you want to go, there are alternatives. There are ways to get through it, to walk through these seasons of life that can be very, almost insurmountable, if you want to call it that. But I hear your story and I'm like, how can we take and repackage that to help other people with whatever they're dealing with? It could be finances. It could be their business struggles. It could be anything. I think there's practical things that you've done that have helped you enable these doors to open as well. I think there's things you did as well to ensure that you were being faithful with what you were given. You might have been still coming off your drug addiction. You were doing things then. Like, I don't know if there's anything like that stands out right now in your mind that you might want to share with people that are dealing with, whether it's drug addiction or, post-traumatic stress disorder or, loss of a spouse or anything like that you might think might help.
Yeah. So, the one thing I would say is that no matter what you go through, whatever pain you've been through, whatever your background may be, you have to understand that doesn't define who you are, number one. That doesn't define who you are. And it's like you said earlier, like, a lot of people can take what they've been through and they can start playing the victim. And yeah, you can do that. And you can say, this is what I've been through. And so you can use that to explain your behavior, right? But what you can't do is use that explanation or that excuse to make you better. But what you can choose to do is say, okay, this is what I've been through. And you know what? According to the statistics, this is where I should be at, but I don't have to be that. I can choose a different path for myself. And so I don't know if you guys have ever heard of what's known as a transitional character.
No, I
Mhm.
haven't. No.
Okay. So a transitional character, for example, would be like if you've got a family line where it's just reoccurring that there's fatherlessness over and over and over and over again in this family pattern. But then sometimes you have somebody who comes along and they break that cycle. They break it. You have a pattern of addiction throughout a family, and somebody comes along and they break it. That's what's known as a transitional character. And so for me, in a lot of ways, I'm a transitional character because, even though I didn't have a father around, and that's been kind of a reoccurring theme in our family history, I chose to not do that. I have 2 children and I'm there for them on a regular basis. Every day I'm there for them. I get up with them, take them to school almost every day, pick them up from school almost every day. I teach them about God. I'm there for them at every school event, every athletic event. And so I choose not to let my past define who I am, but rather to take my past and the pain that I've been through and choose to use it as an avenue to give me a level of compassion for people who are where I was or who are just in pain in general, and to turn around and see how I can invest in them, build them up, and help them. So no matter what you're going through, you have to choose how you respond to it. You can be a victim, but that doesn't help anybody.
No, and all these. I'll give out a quick disclaimer to everybody that's listening. Levi is not in jail. He's not speaking to us from across the glass. So he just got to throw a joke in there every now and then. So I'll back up just a little bit before I make my point. But so the Christian girl that you knew back then, are you still together, or did you move on to another person or
Yeah,
how did
we
that?
no, I'm not with her anymore. We were together for several years, but we ended up going different paths. And so no, I'm not with her anymore.
Okay, but so she was. I believe that people come into your lives at the right moment for a certain reason. So sounded like mission accomplished there. Um, but what I see a lot and what I hear a lot of these kids that are in foster homes or on the bus or going to a program or whatever, they don't have parents around. And just like today, every Thursday I have lunch with my daughter at her school because that's everybody knows Thursdays are reserved for her because I want to make a point that I see her regularly because she lives with her mom. So a lot of these kids are growing up without parents, and even the kids that are growing up with parents, the parents are disconnected,
Yeah,
and they go right down that same road of drugs, alcohol, gangs, whatever and whatnot. And I think that's why it's so important to highlight what you're doing, because you're that mentor that these young men and women, these girls and boys see, and then you can speak and say, hey, look, I was there. I was there, but look where I am now. I didn't even know who my father is. My mom, she is where she is, and I turned out okay because I, just like you said, I chose to change myself instead
yeah,
of playing that victim card. And so the thing is, how do you get someone that is at that point of, they're just using the victim card and they really don't want to change? Like, how do
yeah,
you turn that tide to, hey, look, man, you can do better. Life is
Maybe
better than this.
maybe it's not even they don't want to change, but they don't know that there's an alternative. They're so ingrained in what they've been, like you said, transitional character. They're a pre-transitional character. They don't know there's another alternative universe that can be living right now. So I think there's a slight tweak there. It's maybe an ability to even understand there's something beyond where you're at now.
yeah. I think personally, the way I see it is like they're stuck in this system, and they don't even realize they're stuck in a system. They just know what they've been through. They understand that because of what they've been through, they're limited. All that's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. And so, but what they don't realize is that they have something inside of them. They have this power and this ability and this potential inside of them that they can choose, and they can break through those limits. So, what does that take? First off, number one, they have to face the pain. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because typically, naturally, what we do is we do anything we can to escape the pain. And part of escaping the pain is playing the victim,
Yep.
right? Um, and I mean, that's a viable way to escape the pain. You say, yeah, I've been through the pain and I'm a victim, and that limits me. And so reality being, though, that you can reach deep inside yourself. You can face the pain that you've been through. You can face the cause of it. You can experience it. And yeah, it's going to hurt. And sometimes that requires therapy and counseling and stuff like that. It always requires talking about it, right? And so you can do that through counseling, through therapy. You can do that through different groups that you can go to. There's recovery groups if you're struggling with addiction. There's all these different kind of groups that you can get involved with, and you can face that pain that you've been through. You can say, this is where it's from. This is the cause of it, right? That's the first step. Understanding where it comes from and facing and experiencing and feeling that pain. And once you feel it and you experience and you begin to work through it and you talk through it, then what you can do is you can move on from it. Because at that moment, what you can do is you can turn around and you can say, these people, they hurt me and they hurt me bad and it messed me up. But guess what? I can forgive them.
Yeah.
I don't have to let what they did to me to define me for the rest of my life. It doesn't have to define my present or my future, because I choose how I respond to it. Yes, it hurt me. Yes, it's been a reoccurring theme of pain throughout my life, but today I can choose to make that change because I can forgive them. I can face and experience that pain, and I can begin to heal and move on from it. And whenever I heal and move on from it, however I do that, whether it's therapy, counseling, religion, or whatever the case may be, once I start to heal and move on from that pain, that then puts me in a place where I have a level of compassion for people who are hurting like that. And I can then turn around, knowing what I've been through, knowing how I've come through it, knowing how I found healing. I can turn around and reach into their lives, invest in them, speak into their lives, build up these people who are hurting. And it can become a passion for me to help people who are hurting, right? And that's what tends to happen. People who go through something crazy, something painful, something traumatic, once they come through it and they actually find healing, they have compassion for people who are there. And that creates a passion and a fire inside of them to reach back and help those people because they know how they can overcome it. They know they have that potential. They know they have that power. They know they have that ability because they've seen it happen in their own life. And so they look at people who see themselves as limited, but they see people who can break through those barriers and they know how to help them do it.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's a good thing that, you can show them, hey, look, you can push through those barriers. I mean, I went through cycles in my life where I coped as well with alcohol, because I wasn't willing to deal with what's going on in my life at the time. And so it took a long time. Thankfully, I made the decision to go get help, and it's helped a lot. But that doesn't mean that today everything is gone and wiped away. I'm sure you have a lot of things that you remember, and a lot of pains from the past. But I mean, so how about today? Like, what? I mean, I'm sure you're struggling every day, just like anybody else is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of times you have people who have gone through the things they've been through, and they've made a huge change in life, and people look at them like, they live a perfect life now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's just not how it is. It's never that way. Nobody lives a perfect life. Everybody struggles. So I would say for me personally, the biggest thing that I always come back to is, trying to be the best father that I can be, right? Because there's a lot of things, because I didn't have that father figure coming up, that I don't know
Mm-hmm.
about.
Yeah, no one taught you. You didn't have a dad around. You didn't have a mentor to
Right.
show you what to do and what not to do.
Yeah. And so it's like, constantly, I question myself like, okay, what can I do better as a father? Is this a good thing to do as a father that I'm currently doing? Is this working? Is this not working? And then I always question myself like, okay, what are a regular struggle is trying to figure out what it means to be a good father and how to invest in my children well. And, I make mistakes all the time. So people need to understand that it's a lifelong process of not just healing, but becoming the best version of yourself that you can be. I mean, you're always going to be healing throughout your life because you're almost always going to be dealing with some kind of pain.
Yeah,
But
most
you can
people.
always constantly be progressing to become the best version of yourself as possible by surrounding yourself with the right people, reading the right books, getting a hold of the right resources, listening to the right podcasts, whatever you got to do to improve. That's the path you need to choose.
Yeah, exactly. It needs to be a healthy outlet versus a toxic one. And no, that and everybody that has gone through things, and most people in this life have gone through things, and will continue to go through things, and it's all about choices. Whether we say, hey, yeah, whatever happened in my past, I'm gonna let that dictate my day tomorrow,
Yeah.
which we shouldn't do that. And no, I had, my parents are still married. I had a great childhood, came from a great home, and then having a child of my own, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Even though my dad taught me a lot of great things, but there's no manual that says, hey, this is how you're supposed to raise your kids. Dude, there's no manual on it. So um, it's good. It's refreshing to hear that, Jordan and I aren't the only ones that are questioning ourselves. Like, hey, am I doing the right thing? Because, I think back to your story, and I was telling my wife this last night. Levi was doing drugs and having sex at the age of 11. My daughter's fixing to turn 10. And
Yeah. My daughter's 10. Yeah.
bro, that scared the crap out of me.
It
I'm just
scares
like,
me to death.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
but the key there to that is you're interjecting yourself into their lives. You're there, and the best thing that they can have in their life is a father and a mother there that's showing them love, and trying to teach them the right thing. Yeah, they're probably going to mess up. Who doesn't? We're not
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
They're going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, hang out with the wrong kids. But we're there as parents to remind them, like, hey, look, that's a bad choice. And sometimes you kind of you got to let them do their own thing. But yeah, it's definitely scary. Thinking back, I'm sure you're there's a lot of tension
You
there
think
with that. And
you
your
think
10-year
about
old.
society in general, like it's
Absolutely,
not.
man.
We have these in the last couple of years. The millennials in general have been picked on a lot for this safety pin or the safe places and all that kind of crap. And I mock that because we try to act in certain regards that you can shelter people and the PC culture, like we're going to protect them and put a big bubble around them. But as you see, reality comes at you. Even as adults, life is not fair. Life can beat the shit out of you at any turn in the road. Like you can do everything right, and something happens in your workplace, something happens in your health, whatever. Like life is not easy. It's not fair. So from early on, if we don't, give the kids the skills they need by not our words but our deeds, and they watch us day in and day out, they don't listen to us necessarily, right? But they see what we're doing. They see that we're making we're getting up for work. We're eating healthy foods. We're treating each other with respect. We're trying to make the world a better place. They see that, but our words mean nothing if our actions don't follow. For one example, a couple of times now, many times I should say, I brought my kids to areas where like areas where there's a lot of homeless people or whatever. And I intentionally go that way it's a longer way to where we're going. I take city transit when I don't have to. I want to expose my kids to, hey, you know what? We're very blessed right now. We're very fortunate, but that could change tomorrow. Like our reality is only because we're allowed right now to be stewards of what we've been given. And so hearing your story, like really solidifies in my spirit of like, I have to be more urgent with the message I'm giving my kids, from the way they're treating their siblings to their mom to, their classmates and everything they're doing, because who knows on the other side of that, who's affected by, abuse in the home, by drugs in the home. They don't have fathers. So what am I teaching my kids to help these kids be a better, to make this world a better place? It's your story, man. It's so impactful, and I think so many people could be affected if we could, get it out there at scale. And I think that's the one thing that we have in our disposal nowadays is with technology. Um, think about for years, you'd hear the older people saying like, "Well, back in my day," and they'd always kind of play that card. And kids are soft nowadays. And yes, maybe there's an element that's changing right now. But I'll say this: every single person that I heard that story, if you really peel the onion back and really hear and feel what's going on prior to, there's so much hurt in their world. They just masked it. They put on these facades that everything is fine, and they just never addressed it. So they're living in a broken state almost continually because they didn't want to come off soft. They didn't want to be transparent with the world and take these masks off. So they never lived a true peaceful life. It was always this anxiousness about who they are and their character. So hearing your story and how transparent you are with, at the age you had sex, the age you started using drugs, the fact that your mom was giving you, marijuana as allowance, that's the kind of stuff that when I share with my kids that I know a guy like you in the story that you've walked through, like it's going to make them a better person. So I'm excited about, sharing this with the world and getting a chance to take part in your story for even but for a second.
Absolutely, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate you guys.
no, I appreciate you coming on, man. Jordan sent me that link to that video, and I watched it in one sitting, and I'm like, holy crap, dude has got some stuff on his shoulders, and he's been through a lot of stuff, and to see where he's at right now, and it's amazing that he wants to be a servant. He wants to serve others when he could take whatever route he wants to, and it's very inspiring to see that and to hear that. And so when you started or making that change and you stopped using the drugs and all that, so like how did you go about that? I mean, you don't just wake up one day and you go cold turkey, everything's great, and now you're doing good things and life is great.
Yeah, for me, it was pretty dramatic. And a lot of people don't have that story. And I understand that, but I'm kind of like one of those people that's like when you choose to do something, like you're just all in or you're all out. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
either you're in or you're out. So for me, I was all in immediately whenever I gave my life over to God.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I did first of all was I had to separate myself from the people that I've been dealing with.
Yep.
So I separated myself from them. I started going to church. Sorry, I was just thinking of a funny story at church. 'Cause I had a Sunday school teacher that every Sunday he would ask somebody to volunteer to pray at the end of class. And I remember I walked up to him after Sunday school and I said, "Look," I said, "don't ever ask me to pray." And the next week he asked me to pray, and
Of
I
course.
did. And I didn't really know anything about praying. So when I finished, uh, I just stopped talking and I opened my eyes and I looked up and was looking around and everybody still had their eyes closed and their heads bowed. And I was like, that's it. Typically when you pray, you're supposed to say amen at the end. So I didn't. But anyways, I just thought of that. But no, yeah, I separated myself from the people that I've been dealing with and I surrounded myself with a new group of people. I started going to church and getting involved with people at church. And so, the thing is, like, if you want to make changes in your life, you got to put yourself around people who are part of those changes. You have to put yourself around people who are living those changes, who are exemplifying those changes to you. And so that was one of the main things I did at first was I separated myself from them, and I got around a new group of people. I started reading. I started investing in myself. Like I said, I got my GED. I started learning. I went to Bible college. If you want to make changes in your life, then you've got to have new information coming into your life. You have to have a pathway set before you. You have to have guidance. You can't do it on your own. It just don't happen like that. That's just not how it works. Because there's people that have gone before you who are stronger than you and who are strong where you are weak, that can help you, that can strengthen you, that can guide you and show you the way that you need to go if you really want to be successful. And so one thing I would really say is, look, it's not a weakness to be dependent upon other people. You have weaknesses in your life for a reason, and we typically look at them as weaknesses. But if you pay attention to your weaknesses, you can understand that they can put you in a position for strength because they force you to be dependent upon other people who are stronger than you. And you're always stronger with other people than you are by yourself.
Absolutely, and on the flip side of that, you can be that strong person that one person needs in their life because, like you, I am also that kind of person. I'm all in or I'm not. So I quit drinking. I drank one day and the next day, and I haven't drank since. And people are like, "How'd you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just made it. Yeah, I just did it. I made the
Yeah.
decision. Now, don't get me wrong. Is there times that I want to drink? Absolutely, but
Yeah.
I know what the consequences of that are. So, and everybody's not as strong willed. So, um, it's good to have somebody like you that is strong willed that can, mentor these kids, these people. I mean, even adults. I think you could easily mentor adults and young children and anybody basically that help them. Hey, look, life sucks, but hey, I'm life for me is better now, and here's why. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not the victim anymore, and so with you being out there, obviously you have your daily job and all that stuff, but how often do you get to go in and do your volunteer work, if we want to call it that?
Yeah, so I mean, I volunteer at the church where I go in the youth ministry. But like I said, I've been speaking in different places, spoken in some churches. I mean, I've spoken at a teen center, recovery programs. I'm speaking actually at a thing called a Lions Club tonight, which is like a community service organization,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm speaking at a Sacramento County Meth Coalition next week. So this past month, I've actually spoken a lot. I think I'm going on like 6 times now, 5 or 6 times. Um,
Well,
but
and
right now,
you're obviously good at speaking, because you're just going on, which is good. I like it,
that's
because that's what we need. We need people that are, that are gonna have to be told, hey man, just calm it down a little bit. Like, no, I got a message. I got a
yeah,
message. Let me let
yeah,
So
me
yeah.
let me say it.
a
So
question though
no,
on
that's good.
two things.
But I'm
So we talked about
go ahead,
this,
Jordan.
the piece of, being poured into and then giving. We talked about, you have to fill yourself and you have to also give to else, others. You think of like a body of water. So very practical speaking here, you have a body of water, you have a creek or river going into this body of water. If there's no outlet, what happens to that body of water? It gets stagnant, right? So you need an inlet and you need an outlet. And I think
Stagnates.
people are the same way. Everywhere, every lane of our lives, whether it's marriage, family, kids, finances, work, you need to have an inlet and an outlet. Someone that's above you that you're reaching out to, that you're getting poured into. They're, like you said, they exemplified what you need to do. And then you're also, pouring into somebody else. I think that makes a whole healthy person. So I think, what you're doing is phenomenal. I watch, like the Eric Thomas, you're looking to people that have already done it, paved the way, and you do strategically people that have gone through the same path almost that you've gone through, and now you're also doing the same thing. So I do think success is a
Yeah.
moving target, but I think big picture, you are going to see a lot of open doors because of what you're doing. And then two, like, I think the way that you're going about it is you're serving the need already. The need is being filled. The financial gain, the victory, if you want to call it that, reward is going to be coming. And I love the fact you're not searching for money. You're not searching for these huge rewards. You're searching to how can I help people in different lanes that you can affect positively because of your past.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like to be honest with you, I hope people will pay me, but at the same time, I would gladly speak for free, and I'd do it like that for the rest of my life, just because I know that this is what I'm gifted at, and this is my greatest opportunity. The greatest thing I have to use to impact people is the words that I speak, because I'm gifted to be able to speak. But like, I would do it for free. That's the thing. People don't know that, and they might pay you, but I would do it for free. um, but right now I'm just in like the beginning phases of starting like a speaking career. So I'm really in that grinding phase. So I'm not from Sacramento. I've been out here a few years, so I'm not that well known yet in this particular area. But every day I'm grinding. I'm sending out emails. I'm sending out video links to high schools, to youth organizations, to recovery ministries and organizations. I'm making these phone calls, and I'm just figuring out different ways that I can improve what I'm doing to try to catch the attention of these people, so that I can get into high school, specifically high schools. I want to get into high schools and youth detention centers and different youth organizations, particularly that deal with students who come from an at-risk background. So I'm doing whatever I can. I'm trying to improve the emails I send out. I'm trying to improve the videos that I'm putting out, just so that I can, network with people and make connections with people and get into these different places and speak and share my story. But yeah, right now I'm really grinding it out every single day. And it's fun, and I don't see this thing. It's not like something that's going to happen overnight. I see this being a long-term type of thing. It's going to take some time, but I'm willing to put the effort in, and I'm willing to do a program that will teach me the steps of how I need to go about it. I'm willing to work with people and take their investment into me, their mentorship or whatever, and just grind it out until it happens, because that's the only way you can go about life. If there's something you need to do, then you can't just expect it to happen. You got to put in the work to make it happen. Because God gave you 2 hands, He gave you 2 feet, He gave you a mouth, and He gave you a brain. So you got to use it, and you got to put the work in and make it happen. So that's where
Hey,
I'm at right now, just grinding.
easy now. All of us don't have, those things you called a
Pete,
brain. So.
something for you actually to think about. I thought just came to mind when you were talking there, Levi. Pete and I run in a lot of military veteran circles, some official, some unofficial. And something I've noticed recently in the last year or so is when you get caught in this community, when it's all military, all veteran type organizations, what happens is you end up circulating the same kind of stories, the same kind of fulfillment, the same prophecy in a sense. Like, I've been sorry, I can't speak here. Traumatic event has happened. Yeah. Traumatic event has happened
Use
to
your
me,
words.
and I'm X because of it, right? Y happened or X happened, and now Y is my reality. And something that I think we could hear more of your stories, more of guys like you speaking into veteran organizations to say it's not just veterans that are suffering. There's so many other people that are, look at my story and look where I've become. So I think veterans can be, our communities can be shooken up a little bit by people like you. So that's something I don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but I want to start putting you on a pedestal in a sense to help you get in front of other veterans that are suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that, because I do think we need to hear other stories outside of our circles to say we're not the only ones that have struggles in life. Things happen to everybody. So sometimes you got to put the big boy pants on and figure our way out and overcome this.
Yeah, and that's I mean, I was along the same lines there, thinking that your message could really impact a lot of veterans because they deal with all the issues from being in the military and whatnot, and a lot of them initially I think would be like, well, what does this guy know? He's never been in the military. Well, South Atlanta is pretty much like the military, so you know. But no, that's it's 100% what Jordan is saying, that you could definitely impact a lot of the veterans out there, because they I don't know if they just don't want to change, or I see them. I see a lot of them all the time around here because there's tons of them, and a lot of them are just always in the dumps, always negative. Life is all negative, 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 and I'm like, dude, you got to find something. Like for me, I left the Army last year, and it's kind of really not really been a roller coaster, but things have gone quite well. So, I've been waiting for this period of, darkness looming over me, and all these things to happen, and they haven't happened yet, which I'm very thankful for. And I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. And my question is, at what point did you like, when did the light bulb go off? Be like, oh, I need to be doing this right now. I need to be speaking. I need to be engaging these folks, because to me, it's it happens. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
boom, the light went off.
So with me, it started off in when I was in college. I had a desire to speak, but I didn't really think I would be good at it. So I took a public speaking class, and I think there was maybe like 12 students total in the class. And I mean, I talk kind of fast when I'm up in front of an audience, and then especially like when I'm nervous, like I talk even faster. So I remember when we were in that class, we were given a 7-minute speech we were supposed to
Super
do, and I did
efficient,
mine in
super
like 4
efficient.
minutes. So yeah, so I was like, I thought that was confirmation. Like, okay, you probably shouldn't speak or preach
Can I
or
get an
anything like
amen?
that. Um, but then,
Yeah, that's all you got to
but
say, right? When you're
yeah,
in front of a congregation, can I get an amen, please?
can I
Glory.
get an amen, and let's pray and go home, amen.
Amen.
um,
Yeah.
Hallelujah, brother.
so no, but actually, I got the opportunity. Yeah, I got the opportunity to share my story in one of our chapels in college, which pretty much most of the school is there whenever we have our chapels because it's required. So it's like 400 people. So I went from this public speaking class of 12 to 400 students, and I shared my story, and I knew whenever I was speaking, I could just feel that I was being used, that something was going on here, that it was more than just me speaking, like God was using me. So that was how I knew that day. That's how I knew that I was supposed to be speaking. Um, and it goes back to my story again, so that's one thing we can never get away from. We got this story, and everybody has a story, and everybody's story matters. And so in some way, some shape, some form, we can share our story. But I knew that day that that's when I should be speaking. And so I started getting a lot more involved into it after that. And I haven't stopped, obviously since. So that's how I knew.
With when going from 12 to 400, that's a big jump. And I've briefed in the military. I've briefed small number of people. I've briefed very high level people and whatnot. And of course, the small group isn't too bad, but then you brief, the high level officers enlisted. It kind of get a little nervous there for a second. Did you find yourself like, holy crap, this is actually happening? And then you kind of choke up on your words, or you're just like, man, I got this. I'm gonna roll with it.
I was nervous. Yeah, I remember I was real nervous. And, if you've ever played sports, you typically get nervous before you play. But for me, I'm kind of, I wasn't just addicted to the high back in the day. I was addicted to the risk and the
Mm-hmm.
adrenaline. So for me, it was like, once I got up there, it was like playing sports. It was like that nervousness went to good use. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was like this energy that flowed inside of me that actually became something that helped me rather than hindered me. And that's not everyone's experience, but that was my experience. It became something that was positive rather than being something that held me back or was negative.
Yeah, and you hit a key word there, high. Um, I've had these conversations with people, civilians, everybody, talking about getting high to that adrenaline. Like when Jordan and I would go out on missions, go out on raids at night. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. When you get in that position and there's a firefight going on, it's like I've never been that high in my life. Like
Yeah.
you cannot reproduce that, and it doesn't matter what drug you take. It does, and so now that it's gone, a lot of people, like myself, have a lot of problems with reaching. We're trying to find that high, and so for me, thankfully, I found skydiving. I still skydive and whatnot, and that's a lot of fun. And then, this past Monday, I was able to fly fish. And when you catch that sucker and then put it in the net, dude, it's like your body is screaming because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just gave it a huge dose of heroin. And I mean, that's what and
Yeah.
so it's good that you said that, because that is, the drugs are now being replaced by you going to speak to people, and that gives you that high that you feel. and
It does. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's what's good, because now you want more of it though. You're like, man,
Yeah.
I
Right.
want to do this. Yeah, just like people that have substance abuse issues, they want more and more of it, but this is a good high. And so the point is that there are highs out there that can make you actually more high and feel better than any drug known to man. So
Yeah.
that I just wanted to highlight that, because I find myself in a situation trying to find, good outlets and good things to do that fill that gap, that void.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember telling a friend once at the gym, I said, uh, I said something along the lines of like speaking or preaching felt better to me than sex. And he thought I was crazy. But, it's reality being like all of us are addicts to something,
Hmm.
everybody. We're all addicted to something. Some of us, though, we're addicted to good things. Some of us are addicted to terrible things. But we're all addicted to something. And so, really, the key is choosing to be addicted to the right things that are going to benefit you and benefit other people. And like you said, you can get the same high or actually a greater high from things that are good for you than you can from things like drugs or alcohol. So, it's just getting into the position where you're addicted to the right things that are going to help you and help other people.
And with what you're doing, there's no hangover. Thankfully, there's no
Yeah, right.
coming down off of it or anything like that. Um, and I've heard this from a lot of other people that serve in some capacity or form. The gratification that they feel, maybe a little selfish. Hey, I'm doing this. It makes me feel great, but that I think that goes a long way, because you do get a lot of gratification by just sharing your message and telling other folks about, life sucks, but hey, here I am. I'm not in jail. I'm not dead. And I've got kids of my own, and I'm raising them with my wife, and life is good, but hey, it's a struggle, but
Yeah.
your life
I
can
don't
be
think
better,
that's
your
selfish for a
life, if you
second, though, of
choose to
finding
do that though.
fulfillment. That's you're doing something good, and I know we kind of posture that way a little bit, but I think when you're doing good, I think you should seek fulfillment with what you're doing.
Yeah.
that's not the reason why you're doing it, but if you're not being fulfilled while you're doing it, you're probably doing the wrong things.
Yeah, it's hard to. I mean, it's hard to love somebody else
Exactly.
if
Yeah.
you don't love yourself well. You know what I mean? And so if you can't invest in yourself,
Exactly.
you're probably not going to be investing in
So
anybody.
something I guess I want to talk about briefly is, I don't know how we're going to do it exactly, but obviously we'll have your social media handles on our Facebook and Instagram and whatnot, and LinkedIn. I'm already your biggest cheerleader. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. You're going to change lives. You're going to save lives. And that's kind of the mission behind the Driving Loaded podcast, is making a positive change in people's lives. Even one person matters, right? So I don't know if there's a way we can go out and be proactive
Absolutely.
for you and help you, but we'll do anything we can to help put you on a pedestal, to help, your speaking career, and the fact that you're out there helping the world in general. Like that's a huge win for us. So I'm not
Awesome,
so
man. I
crazy with
really
that yet,
appreciate
but
that. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, definitely. we're trying to grind it out right now as well. One thing that I'll do is I'll look up for you some information on Project Healing Waters. So that's the nonprofit that takes disabled veterans and they teach them how to fly fish. I tie my own flies. I built my own fly rod. A healthy outlet. And I think that with your story, you'd be able to go up to one of their meetings, and they're all over the U.S., and just speak to them, say, hey, here's my story, because a lot of those veterans that are going to those meetings are hurting. They don't find that fellowship, that brotherhood that they did in the military. And I think that a story like yours could, I think, get people to, get off their ass and make that change that they need to not just get in that same rut. Well, I'm going to take my pills and drink some booze today, and then life still sucks. I want to kill myself type deal. Because we see, no, and that's we see that too often. I hate hearing about anybody committing suicide because there's no reason to do it. And so I think that is one way I can at least try to help you. Because I think that they would benefit from it, and I don't know how much interaction you've had with military members or not, but they can. I mean, I benefit from it, your story, because it puts me in place, and it checks me like, hey man, this dude's doing all this stuff and I'm over here just doing what I'm doing. So it's very inspirational.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've had quite a bit of interaction with people with military background. My best friend is currently a chaplain in the military.
Nice.
And I actually tried to go to the military before I went to Bible college, and they told me because I had a GED that I needed some college credit hours, and so they wouldn't let me in. I was trying to get into the Air Force because I had a friend who was going in at the same time. Actually, he was rejoining, but they wouldn't let me in. So I was like, all right. I just ended up going to college and went down a different path. I considered it quite a few times after that as well, but definitely my background and a lot of the things that people in the military go through intersect. So there's definitely some common ground there. And I would love the opportunity to be able to speak to veterans who are struggling, who are in pain, who are dealing with all the different things they're dealing with, because, man, there's hope for them, and they have so much power and potential inside of them. I mean, look what they did for us, there's so much that they can do today, here and now. And I would love to have the opportunity to speak to them and help them see that. So,
yeah, a friend of mine, he's a civilian, but he and I go fishing quite a bit. And he's like, he put it into perspective for me. He's like, you already you had that desire to serve your country. And so there's so many, and I thought about it, I'm like, that's actually true. Maybe that's why I have, the thought reoccurring, like, where can I help and serve other people? So a lot of those, people that are having problems, they've already served once. And so
yeah,
I think that's in there. They were already willing to do it once. They could do it again by becoming a success story and then helping other veterans.
absolutely,
I
man.
think it just, as you can imagine how much that would change the veteran community, and hopefully really stop the suicides of all
Yeah,
these
and
people.
the fact that you're not
Yeah,
military, you're not
absolutely,
a
man.
veteran. Actually, to me, it bolsters why you're of value in those communities, because we can point towards somebody else that's overcome, that's in theory not gone through as much as the military, because it's all trauma nonetheless. It's just a venue where you sought the trauma out at. So I'm excited about helping you get plugged in those communities, because there's definitely a lot out there. Like, top of my head, there's probably 50 right now I can think of that would take your your skill sets and apply them tomorrow once we get the right connections made.
That'd be
Well,
awesome.
right on. Well, hey man,
I'm down for
hopefully we can get you back on here in a month or two and kind of just see how things are going, and maybe after your first military engagement, get some feedback from you. But dude, I had a blast chatting with you today and hearing your story. Like, there was goosebumps. There was like, I didn't cry today. I took some pills, so I didn't do that. But no,
Yeah.
no, your story, man, it's really impactful. I think people are going to hear that story and it's going to really check their reality. It's going to give them as Pete said, your perspective is going to change again. It's going to kind of focus back on what you be focusing on, right?
Yeah. Thank you, man. It was awesome. I enjoyed it. It was
sure.
great. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you. It was our pleasure, truly, and can't wait to link up again in about a month or so to see where you're at and see what's going on. So that's all,
Peace.
folks. We will see you guys soon. Later.
Peace out, guys.